This is Tell Me What to Read, the podcast of booktopia.com.au. I'm Nick Wasiliev, and for today's book discussion podcast, I am joined by Joe Lewin. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning.
Joel Naoum. Good morning, Joel.
Morning.
And Shanu Prasad. Good morning, Shanu.
Hello.
Let's kick right into it. And Joe, I will throw to you first. What have you been enjoying over the last couple of months?
Look, I feel like I've really peaked early for 2022. I've read two of the most astounding books that I've read in a really long time, and I'm throwing the gauntlet down to any author to top this for 2022.
Wow.
So the first one is Jennifer Egan, The Candy House. This is just, oh my goodness, a mind-blowing book, all about memory and technology, but also, as with just about every book that I read and love, human emotions and human nature and the nature of relationships. I didn't read Visit from the Goon Squad, which is, I think, linked. So that's definitely on my TBR pile, now. But yeah, this book just blew my mind. I was hesitant because it's got a little bit of a speculative fiction vibe to it, and I am wary of that, as you know. Joel's laughing at me. Thank you very much, Joel. But
because you described this book as a little bit of Joel book.
Yeah, it's a little bit of Joel, right? Because it does have that kind of what if the world was this, but at the end of the day is still very, very literary, very human. Really just astounding. I loved it. Did I actually tell you anything about the book other than I loved it?
I know you're trying to avoid spoilers at the moment because Shanu wants to read this very quickly.
Because Shanu hasn't read the book. So Shanu,
No.
if you want to close your ears while I give you a little bit of a non-spoiler précis.
Okay,
There's a
please.
future state where you can upload your memories to a cloud. And it sort of starts out that you can upload your memories to the cloud to protect you from potential future memory loss. But then the technology becomes that you can upload your memories to a collective cloud. So you can go in and experience your birth from the point of view of your parents, or your conception for that matter, or you can go into other people's minds and experience events in their past through their own eyes. Hugely problematic, right? Hugely problematic that you could actually do that. And why would you want to? Right? Why would you want to really, really know what people think of you? I certainly don't want to know. It follows the creator of the technology. It follows the creator of the research that formed the basis of the technology, and how she, her research kind of was built upon in a way that she didn't necessarily foresee or agree with, and a bunch of other characters whose lives are touched by this technology in some way. So really, really fascinating stuff.
Sounds like Black Mirror-ish almost.
It is quite Black Mirror-ish. It is actually. Yeah, very much so. Very much so. It's all about, social media, gaming.
Totally sounds like my cup of tea, actually.
Oh, totally. It's totally your cup of tea, Joel. And virtual reality, all of those things put together in a way that crosses ethical lines.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Is Goon Squad like that? I never read that either. It was one of the books I'm always meant to read and then never got around to it.
The blurb for Candy House says that it features characters from a Visit from the Goon Squad.
Okay. So it must cross over.
So I
Presumably.
don't know. I don't know whether it's just in that kind of David Mitchell way that there's people with the same name, or I guess in David Mitchell the characters really are the characters, even though the stories aren't linked. I don't know. Next, tell me what to read. I will have read Visit from the Goon Squad, and I'll be able to tell you.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm
Right,
looking
Shani,
forward.
you can safely go back to listening now. I've stopped talking about Candy House. Giving Shani the thumbs up so that she knows she can listen again.
Yes, thank you. I'm so sorry, but I look, what I've discovered in the last year, 2 years, I don't know how long lockdown's been, since I've started reading a lot more books. For me, I find a book the most enjoyable when I have not seen the blurb and when I don't know anything about it. Once I start knowing too much about a book, it makes it hard for me to actually read the book. Whereas if I don't know anything about it and I just see it and I just pick it up, then I find it so interesting and I think you learn different things about a book if you come into it with literally no idea about what's happening in it. And I read A Visit to the Goon Squad and I loved it so much. So I'm really excited to read.
Oh, can you tell us a bit about that? About Visit from the Goon Squad?
I can, because for some reason in my mind, I thought, because this book is a few years old, I thought that it was like a heavy crime Elmore Leonard novel.
It kind of sounds like it, right?
Not realizing that it's nothing like it at all. Literally nothing like it. It's basically, and I don't usually love when books go from multiple perspectives. That's not usually my favorite thing. You know, I usually like to live with a character and follow that character's journey. But this worked so perfectly, and it was one of those books where you just feel like she must have had a full wall of plot point where she's post-it notes where she's trying to work out how you tell a whole story with just telling little bits of the story from different people's point of view, but you get this full picture, and you really invest in every single one of the stories and the characters that you're that you're hearing from the point of view of, but then you're fine with leaving them and moving on to the next one. So I just thought it was just so good. And it was all about there's probably more deeper things because I'm not very good at getting those, but for surface level, it's just about so much great stuff about music and the music industry and just love of music. And then when you become successful but you're still not really, the same kind of successful as you'd like to be because you're not really ever going to be one of those insider people. And I don't know, there's just a lot of themes. It was just really, really good. And I know that everyone said you don't need to read that.
Does it have a speculative fiction bent to it at all?
No.
Okay. So there is a music industry. No spoilers. There is a little bit of a music industry link in
yes, because
Candy House as well.
I really liked how it all worked and ended. I mean, there was a little bit of future. There was by the end of it, it went a little bit into a future that wasn't a future that is a future of that time. So there was a little bit maybe towards the end, and maybe that's what she built on in the second book and went further with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but
Cool.
it was great, and I'm really looking forward to reading it. But I'm saving it.
Yeah.
Like candy, like when you get candy at Easter and you save it till it.
No, I'm a gorger.
It's the perfect time. I'm going to really appreciate it. So I was gorging on too many books, and I want to
And I find that the beginning of the year, the publishers send us all of these amazing proofs for all of the biggest fiction titles that are happening, and then there's this drought in the middle of the year, and then all of the Christmas proofs start coming in. So I find that I've got this reading lull from in May, June, where
the rest of the public is getting those books.
The rest of the public is getting those books, and I'm like, oh, but I already read that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I was always that kid that was like, how come you still have so many Easter eggs? I don't have any Easter eggs left.
Yeah.
Surely I didn't eat them all already.
Yeah. So I'm trying to pace myself.
She ate them all already.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've been completely sidetracked, but that's fine. I absolutely love that.
Sidetracks. These are not sidetracks. These are all very important tracks.
It's really interesting.
Music. It all works together. It's like layers of music.
It definitely is. I'm curious, Joe. You mentioned that you had brought another book with us while you've been on this kick.
The other book that, this one even more so. This one, I'm calling it now Book of 2022. Steve Toltz. It's called Here Goes Nothing. So I don't know if you guys have read any Steve Toltz before. He's only had 2 other novels. The first one was A Fraction of the Whole. A Fraction of the Whole was slightly without the magic part, but Boy Swallows Universe before Boy Swallows Universe. It was this, complex picture of a sort of lower middle class family in Australia in the 80s. There were all these crime links, and it was this sort of family saga around and beautifully heartwarming around a child coming, boy coming of age in that kind of family. Amazing. Quicksand was kind of a continuation of that. It was two best mates that met going to Punch Bowl High, and coming together later in life when life sort of hadn't turned out the way they had always expected it to, and bonding in new and important ways. This next book is not like that at all. Right?
No.
So it's set in Maroubra, and there's a fella who has grown up in a disadvantaged situations, grown up through a series of foster homes, but then finally meets the woman of his dreams, and she kind of lifts him out of his life of petty crime and risk-taking, right? So far, tick, tick, sounds like Steve Toltz. But then he dies and he goes to the afterlife, but it turns out that the afterlife is just really boring. It's just like living your life again.
Worse.
But kind of worse.
Like you've gone to some kind of like place where there's only high rises, and the high rises were built 70 years ago and no maintenance has been done on them.
Yeah, it's like Eastern Bloc. It's
Oh,
like
Eastern Bloc.
geez.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's like
yeah,
Eastern
yeah.
Bloc.
So he goes to the afterlife, and the afterlife is really boring and a bit rubbish. But all through this, there's this kind of sci-fi element, but not told in a sci-fi or fantastical way. It's told in this like super matter of fact, like, oh, well, here I am, I'm in the afterlife, it's a bit rubbish. But at the same time, the story of Angus and his partner and the things that are happening to them and the way he dies is like this. It's kind of Shakespearean, right? So, there's, a guy who doesn't know who his parents are. There's this very eccentric woman that he becomes the partner of. There's a usurper. There's murder. There's vengeful ghosts. There's jealousy. There's all of these kind of Shakespearean themes, which I just found just fantastic. I just found it so interesting, and I was absolutely gripped. I couldn't wait to finish, because I just couldn't wait to find out if we ever get any explanation to why this has happened. It really it kind of gently and lovingly points fun at organized religion and ideas of the afterlife, people who believe in reincarnation or heaven and hell and all of those kinds of things, in that, everyone was wrong and it's so much more mundane than anyone could possibly have thought. So it's an absolutely fascinating book, so different to anything I've ever read. And I'm so happy it's come from him, because I've followed his career, and I really love Steve's work. So yeah, I'm calling it. I reckon it's going to be my best book that I will read in 2022. And unfortunately, halfway through February, I've already read it.
So say 10 months in, we've got 10 months to go and you've already called it.
I gotta say, I know I was only going to talk about 2 books, but I do want to say that last night I picked up the absolutely stunningly beautiful limited edition proof I've received for the new Geraldine Brooks novel. It's called Horse, and it's about a horse. But it's not really about the horse. It's around the horse racing industry and the horse art scene, and man's relationship with horses, like, I guess, Barlap and Seabiscuit and those kind of like big hyped amazing racehorses. I'm only a couple of chapters in, so I can't talk to it, but I mean, that's a real treat. It's been so many years since we've had a Geraldine Brooks, so very exciting.
Wow, you're I'm loving where you are in terms of just the stuff that you're reading right now, hitting many I'm sensing a theme of like almost kind of dystopian, but also just fascinating as all hell.
Yeah, and dystopian is not my bag at all, right?
Yeah.
Like if you say this novel is dystopian, I'm like, yeah, no, thank you. It's only because of the pedigrees of those authors, and because I'm a massive snob.
Yes.
Pedigrees of those authors that I've dipped into books with that subject material, but they're not your average dystopian novel, right? They're a lot more.
Steve Jobs is not
Very
dystopian.
smart.
No.
It's just
It kind of is dystopian, though.
It sounds like it from how you described it.
The afterlife is a dystopia.
You know what it did though. You're right. I think you're both right, and that I read it as well. I mean, all three of us have read the Steve Toltz book, and I felt the same way I do feel when I read dystopia. Like I felt almost not as badly as like I wasn't like in tears like I was reading like Cormac McCarthy's The Road, but it gave me the same feeling, right? So I would just give a warning to anyone if you're feeling a little bit fragile in just life, maybe give it until things are a little bit happier before you read.
Yeah, it's true. It's pretty desolate, isn't it?
Yeah. Without in being like in its mundanity, I think that's the worst part of it, because you can totally imagine it.
Yeah.
And I think that's
and the
worst
disappointment
part.
of like, is this it?
Yes. Yeah. That's
No matter what you think in your heart of hearts is going to happen after you die, there is no way that you guessed it was that.
No, and because he's
that it was
such
living in a
writer,
failed communist state.
Yeah, that's right.
he's such a good writer. You really like that. That's why it works, because his writing is so good that you're just suckered into what he's writing. Yeah. So but you can totally have two different reactions. You can have my reaction where I was like, I can recognize that this is an amazing book, and that's just stressed me out. Or you can have Jo's reaction where she's like, woohoo!
Yeah.
It's a bit like a serious literary treatment of The Good Place.
It is exactly that, right? But it's kind of the average place.
Yeah.
Not watching The Good Place,
which does exist in The Good Place in the show.
It does exist in The Good Place. Yeah, there were total Good Place vibes, but more Shakespearean.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jo. I love those recommendations, and everyone, please go and check those books out because they sound amazing. I'm going to throw over to Joel now. Joel, I love that Jo said that what the first book that she discussed was very Joel-like in terms of the subject matter and things that you'd be interested in. I now worry you've been kind of shoehorned and put into a particular category. Time to smash it.
I've been Mark Hardinged.
You've been Mark Hardinged is what you've been. What have you been reading over the last few weeks?
I have one very Joel-like recommendation and another one that isn't. And it's also a very sublime to the ridiculous style of reading recommendation. My first recommendation is 112 pages long, and it is the new On book by Amy Remakis, On Reckoning. I finished it last night. I had started it and not quite had time to finish, and then burned through the last half in an evening. It's so good. It's like reading someone's like rage on the page. It is completely electrifying. The basic, the premise that it takes is about the sort of Me Too moment in Canberra and the politics of the moment about women and rape culture, basically. But it's just, she herself has experienced pretty frightening sexual assault, and she talks about it, but she weaves it into a bigger narrative about it, about how it functions in Australian society and just how terrible we are, basically, at dealing with it. And it's just fantastic. I recommend this book to absolutely anybody. You can read it really, really quickly, and I feel like it's required reading. It will change you even if you already agree with it, which I did, but it still felt like a moment in time that really crystallized for me. Absolutely fantastic book. Obviously it's not long, so you can get through it really easily.
Easily.
Sorry?
Quickly.
Maybe not easily. Yeah. No, I mean, it's the weird thing is it's not hard to read, even though the subject matter is serious. I think it's because of her anger. There is something like righteous about it, which makes you like fist pump. I was talking to Stefania at Nonfiction Trade category manager who is interviewing Amy later today, and she read it yesterday afternoon, and she and I were chatting about it last night, and yeah, I think she had the same experience. By the end, you're sort of fist pumping in like righteous anger with her. I think there's no easy solution, but it's just a really satisfying experience in some ways. Anyway, I highly recommend that. So if you are interested, and then we should have a podcast at some point soon with interview with the author, and she seems just fantastic.
Hold the phone on that. I'll be announcing that later. But yeah, she has been everywhere.
Sorry, Nick, if I'm jumping the gun.
Oh no, it's okay, because it's this book has been everywhere and she's been everywhere. So I'm glad that that this topic is being discussed with this book.
Yeah, she's great. My other recommendation, I said Sublime to the Ridiculous, is a epic fantasy series, which I have by Brandon Sanderson. I've never read Brandon Sanderson's fantasy before, and in fact, I haven't really read a fantasy series in years and years and years and years and years. It's usually just too much for me. But I started this series during my Christmas break, and I'm now into the second book. The first book is 1,200 pages long. The second book is 1,100 pages long. So it's like a lot of actual pages of reading have happened, even though there are only 2 books. They're totally engrossing in the plot. But, I think sometimes the hook of a fantasy book is the world building. And the world building is really interesting. It's set in this world in which there are these big, terrifying storms that happen every couple of weeks. So the whole ecology of the world is built around this idea that all the plants and animals have to sort of hide from these storms. So all the plants sort of suck into these shells. All of the animals that live in the world are shelled, like crustacean type animals, and armored. And it's just that part of it's very alien. And then the human culture is very recognizable, but also it's in some ways it's much more gendered than our society. But they have all these interesting twists on it that I'm finding quite interesting to see play out. For example, it's considered to be unmanly and almost like morally wrong for men to read and to learn to read. So all the women who are, marginalized in not totally dissimilar ways to our society, except they are the only ones who are allowed to read. And so all of the control around education, anything that people need to know to make the world work, women do. So even though
that's right.
Yeah, exactly. And so like all the engineers are women, men are basically good for like digging stuff up, smacking stuff really hard, and killing things, and those are the manly pursuits. And it's like taking toxic masculinity to the nth degree in this culture, and it's just really interesting to see how that plays out. It's obviously set in a sort of like a historic sort of past version of our society, but like a lot of fantasy, but it's totally divorced from it because of the changes that they've made. So it's just really interesting. And the actual plot I don't need to go into, I think, but if you're into fantasy and you haven't read any Brandon Sanderson before, I was reminded of him partially because he finished off the Wheel of Time series, which I never finished reading the Wheel of Time. But the series that aired late last year on Amazon, I think I loved. And then I was like playing with it in my head, and my brothers had just recently read this series and going on and on about it. So I thought, I've got time over Christmas to read 1,200 pages.
What's the name of the series again?
Oh, sorry, I probably didn't say. The Stormlight Archive is the series.
Mm-hmm.
The first book in the series is called The Way of Kings. It's I think from not having read his other books that all of his series are sort of like very loosely connected somehow. But I don't know how that works. So, but yeah.
Is this a trilogy?
This one's a trilogy. Or it might even be might be more than a trilogy. I think there's a fourth book.
But it's finished? Like the series is all out in the world? He's not like still writing. You don't know.
I don't know, which I probably should have looked up before I started it. It's going to be very frustrating.
Yeah.
But, you know, fantasy is like one of those things that takes so long to read the books that really, you know, you start, if I discover that then it's not finished, then fine. I'll get to it eventually, you know.
I mean, you can't read it until next January anyway when you have holidays again, right? So it doesn't really matter.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, very, very fun read. I thoroughly enjoy escapist fantasy when you have the time.
Oh, lovely! I like that you're diving after the Way of Kings. And is the other one that I'm just trying to look it up here? Words of Radiance. Is that the second one?
Yeah, that's the second one that I'm not quite finished that one, but I'll squeak it out, and then I'll probably have to stop reading fantasy because I've got too much other stuff to read. I managed to squeeze in the Steve Toltz and an essay, basically.
Oh my god!
but it's a very different experience. It's not bad to have like a unicorn chaser after reading the Amy Remakers.
Yeah, I'm just tip of the hat to you. That's like 2,500 pages of reading, just cash, to kick off the year. So wow,
I reckon almost everybody in our team has read more than that.
I know.
Yeah, I've been using the Book Riot reading log for a few years, and I always have it open when I have when we do this meetup. And because I'm an Excel nerd, I've also added in the number of pages I read every month. January, I read 2,500 pages.
Wow.
Yeah, there you go.
It was over 8 books instead of 2.
Instead of 2. Don't discount the 112 Amy Remakers pages that I read.
So many books that are like amazing, but like very, very short. So my book count is up and my page count is probably not, but I don't really care. I'm just more curious because I just don't know what I read until we come into one of these things. And I'm like, oh, what have I read? And I have to go back through the photos of the books that I've taken so I can remember. Fancy way of doing something. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joel. But before we get to Shanu, we actually have a sponsored book for this week, which is Heart of Gold by Fiona Palmer. CJ Wishart is a hard-working country girl with a heart of gold, but life can be tough. Her job is backbreaking, her family life is a disaster, and after a string of dating debacles, she put men in the too hard basket. But when Lindsay arrives on the scene as the new Shearer, they have an undeniable spark. But can CJ handle the complications and potential heartbreak of falling in love? CJ learns that when you stay true to yourself and open your heart, anything is possible. Heart of Gold is part of our exclusive Booktopia book club offerings, and you can get it for a special price now. Links are in the description, and it is our sponsored book of the week. And now, on the subject of many, many, many books being read and thousands of pages read, I will now throw to you, Shanu. What have you been enjoying over the past couple of weeks?
Well, I have read technically 30 books this so far this year, which I think is actually down on my count from last year. But I do remember...
That's amazing, Shanu. Far out. You are a powerhouse.
Yeah, but like, can I talk about them eloquently? No, I cannot. So it's not very helpful. That's why I have to read lots, so I can just like spit out I'll just break them up into genres or types of books that I think that people will enjoy. So the first lot of books that I've read that I'm a sucker for, and I will keep reading them as long as the publishers keep putting these covers on them, is what I have called women leaning against furniture wearing fashionable outfits.
Collapsed faceless ladies.
Yes,
it's one of my favorite genres.
It is totally a genre because all of these books, all good, all with their own plots and storylines and so on, but all covering that same theme of that kind of quarter life crisis of what happens when you're in your mid to late 20s and your life is not going the way that you had hoped it would, and how do you get out of that, and how do you make your life a life that you are happy to have. So I've read a couple of those. The first one I started the year with was Love and Other Puzzles by Kimberly Alsop, which is, I believe, out now. And so that one was really interesting because she used like a really quirky idea of how to like kind of jolt this main character out of her sort of complacent life. Then also in that same vein, I can recommend Careering, which is by I'm going to say Daisy Buchanan. Yes, I'm 100% going to say Daisy Buchanan, because she is like the poster girl for this sort of writing, and that one was like, it was quite deep actually. There was a lot of like backstory. That character had like some really traumatic childhood to overcome, which you don't often get. You don't always get in these types of books. So that was really super interesting. And then the third one that I've read most recently was No Hard Feelings, which I have to be honest, I think has my favorite cover. There's something about the combination of the greens and the oranges and the actual oranges on the cover that just speaks to me. And the book itself also, I believe that Amy actually already spoke about this book, and she loved it so much she cried. I thought it just dealt really, really well with those feelings that you have. When from the outside things might be okay, but you're not okay, and how can you ask for help, and how can you get that help, and it's okay to, just because you look like your life is fine, it's okay to still not feel fine. Like, you don't have to feel bad about that. And so I thought that was really good, and the way that she sort of addressed.
And that the woman, the star of this show, really should be feeling very good feelings about her outfit, because it is great.
It's amazing, yeah.
And I aspire to wear those 2 shades of green and lie on, terracotta coloured
100%, yeah,
bed linen.
Yeah,
fantastic.
This is what I mean, right? Because that's the whole point of these books, right? Is that the covers look, I mean, apart from the fact that that's what I love about them, is that you get these, like, they're young, they're beautiful, they've got everything. However, they're not happy, Yeah. And that's what you can get from these covers.
But they're very high fashion, aren't they? Like, it looks like a high fashion shoot, the way that they always seem to have their faces
very
obscured.
Yeah.
Always wearing something fabulous. Strong colours. I mean, it all started, I think, with the Meg Mason, that Meg Mason cover for Sorrow and Bliss was the first time I saw this this look.
And HarperCollins are a leading, they lead the field in like really pushing design along, I think, in book covers, and they've certainly done that in this genre. But it really has exploded. But I think it is such a good signifier. And what's really interesting though is that I'm wondering if that's starting to shift a little bit to, like, I feel like things are starting to look up a little bit, and maybe these women are going to be the next lot of books. They'll be a little bit, their problems won't be so much like, quarter life crisis problems, but like external, issues. You still can't see their face, but they're more upright. So there's one coming that's got, like, you can just see the top of her head and the bun is like happy. It's a happy bun. So yeah, I'm hoping that's where we're going, because but these have been great. So that's been one sort of kind of style of book that I've been reading at the beginning of this year. And then the next one, I've read lots of crime. I don't know why, but all I want to read is crime books. And I've read so many great crime books. This year I've read a couple from Ultimo Press, so Canticle Creek and When We Fall. And I loved When We Fall. It was so interesting because it wasn't, it was like the person, instead of a detective, because I do love a detective, like a procedural, but this one was much more personal, and it was like the person herself was just she just found the body. She didn't know the body, but she's the one that felt, because she found it, that it was her responsibility to find out what happened. So that one was really interesting, and it had dealt with like, family relationships and dementia and all sorts of things. So that one I really, really enjoyed. And I also, other crime I read, oh my God, The Torrent by Danuka Mackenzie, which is also out now. All these you can get. So good. It's like, if you love Dervla and you love that kind of style of writing, you will absolutely love The Torrent. And also to have like a woman writing about a woman who is, half Asian is really great to see. And like, I thought that was excellent. And then the one that I've read, which I think a lot of people will be really excited about, it's kind of like, it's like a Chris Hammer, Jane Harper, that's what they're calling her, the new one of those people. That's what the publisher is saying about this book, is called Dirt Town by Hayley Scrivener. That one you'll have to wait till June for, but it is like the classic, new classic Australian crime film. But this one's really great because, like, again, I said I don't really usually love different voices, but this one, the book works because it has all the different voices. It even has like a Greek chorus of all the kids in the town, which is super, super interesting and something I haven't seen before. So lots of great crime. Highly recommend reading all of those. Read some good YA as well. One of my most favorite authors from ever in my life is Garth Nix, and reading Tertial and Eleanor has made me want to read the whole the whole Sabriel and the whole series again, the Old Kingdom series. So that has been awesome. Yeah, it's really good. It's really,
I've read all the other books. I haven't read the new one.
Yeah, no. And the new one is like a prequel, but normally prequels are terrible, but this prequel is excellent. And yeah, it's really, really, it's really good. And you'll totally want to read all of the other books again. And then the last one I'm just going to mention is a book that I can't really put into a category, so I'll just speak about it on its own. And I have read other ones as well, but this one specifically, something about it I just loved. It's called Hovering by Rhett Davis. And it's a book that's just a little bit strange because it's basically like a woman comes back to her hometown of Melbourne, and she hasn't been back for like 20 years, right? And her hometown is changing. It's changing every day. Streets are moving. Houses are moving around Melbourne. A street that would lead you somewhere one day is now leading you somewhere else. And all the people in Melbourne are like, oh yeah, we just Google Maps is now updating, so we just get it. It's not happening anywhere else in the world. It's just happening there. But for some reason, even though you've got this very like unusual plot device, the book's actually really about like family and art and what is art and like all these questions that you wouldn't expect from a book where you think that the main plot device is going to be actually streets just randomly moving around. But I can't even talk about it very well because, like I said, I'm not great at like, giving the excellent descriptions of these books. But I'm just going to tell you, if that's what our podcast is called, right? Tell me what to read. I'm telling you, go and read Hovering by Rhett Davis. It is super cool. And Joe, if you like the Steve Toltz and you liked all that kind of stuff, I think you're definitely going to enjoy this. And Joel, you like I think you'll also enjoy this.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
It's on my TBR pile, actually. I've got quite a teetering tower of book proofs on my bedside table, and it's on there.
Yeah,
it's hovering.
It's hovering right near the top of that pile.
I would hover it up a little bit because it's
already quite at the top, but sorry, okay. Geraldine Brooks.
No, I understand.
Yeah, Geraldine Brooks is Geraldine Brooks.
Yeah, but this one I think will be super, super interesting. Yeah. Okay, one last book. And then I promise I'll finish. But Ben, I'm sure has talked or will talk about this book, so I'm definitely not going to. All I'm going to say is Son of Sin, award winner. That's it.
Wow. We do have...
I've got that. That's on my TBR.
Yes, we do have a podcast planned coming up with Omar Jasakar as well. So, wow.
That's all I'm going to say. All right, I'm done.
Well, Danny V, eat your heart out. How many books did you bring this week, Shanu? I absolutely love it.
I hope you'll remember and tell me which ones I need to give you the details for, because I certainly won't.
I can just hear Olivia like taking notes already, because the last time you were on, you talked about the Mirror Visitor series, that amazing series, and I know now at the moment that Liv is like ripping through them. Oh,
great! I'm going to talk to her about them then, because yes, I want to talk to more people about them because I love them so much.
Yes, everyone go buy them. They're really good as well. Fantastic, guys. What an amazing selection of books that we've covered this episode. So thank you so much to Shanu and to all of you for all of the books discussed today. And so for all of our listeners, you can check out all of the books that we have discussed today down in the description box, or you can also head to this really amazing website called booktopia.com.au, where there are millions of titles at your fingertips. It's a good website. You should go check it out. We'll be taking 2 weeks off book discussion episodes after this episode has gone out. However, we do have some very exciting episodes coming your way in the next fortnight. Join us on Wednesday next week as we kick off the first of 2 themed episodes around International Women's Day, as we sit down with Mandy Beaumont, author of the incredibly hard-hitting novel The Furies. And as well as that, we'll also be sitting down with the one and only Amy Remakis on her new book that Joel discussed earlier, On Reckoning. And next Friday, we'll be joined by the one and only comedian and host of seminal Australian music cult show Speaks and Specs, Adam Hills, to discuss his new middle grade novel, Rockstar Detectives, in another kids and YA and middle grade spectacular. As always, thanks for listening, and never stop reading.